Meeting to order. I do have one quick agenda change. I just want to note for the consent agenda that I believe the March 19th minutes are omitted. We're not going to vote on them even to be laid over tonight. So we're going to pull March 19th, 2020 minutes from the consent agenda. And then I do not see Mr. Webster is with us, so we will omit the invocation and pledge just this one time. This was his night. But with that, I will go ahead and call our first Zoom County Board meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first one up was Mr. Webster, so I will mark him as absent currently. Mr. Westcott. Mr. Westcott. Mr. Arena.
Here.
Mr. Billich.
Here.
Mr. Booker. Mr. Booker. Mr. Butita.
Here.
Mrs. Crosby.
Here.
Mr. Fellers.
Here.
Mr. Fiducia.
Here.
Mr. Girl.
Here.
Mrs. Gorel.
Here.
Mr. Hoffman.
Here.
Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly. Mr. McDonald.
Here.
Mr. Neighbors.
Here.
Mrs. Red.
Here.
Mr. Salgado.
Present.
Mr. Schultz.
Here.
Mr. Tassoni.
Present.
Only 4 absent, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, we do not have any public comment this evening. I will just say this on the chairman's report. I've been emailing you multiple times a day with updates related to COVID-19 primarily. Questions or need anything, or there's something your constituents are asking you, and we can help get it for you in a quick way, just yell. Other than that, we'll keep things short. And actually, I apologize. I skipped over board member correspondence. So I'm done, but we'll back up to board member correspondence. Any board members with comments?
No, Jim Webster, I'm here.
Okay. Mr. Webster, go ahead if you have any board member comments. Then Mr. McDonald's next.
No, I just got on a bit late here. I didn't know if you did roll call yet.
Okay, good. Welcome, and we'll go ahead and mark you as present, and then I'll go to Mr. McDonald on board member comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'd like to do, or I would like to do a Republican caucus soon, either over the weekend or Monday, just to try to figure out what we want to do moving forward. Do we want to continue do we want to use Zoom? Do we want to meet in person? But if we can reach out to one another and try to come up with we can meet and figure out how we want to do business moving forward.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Any other board members have anything they want to add? Mr. Sony. Oh, go ahead and take the mute off, Mr. Tassoni, and then you're up.
Okay, sorry about that. There I am. And like I say, may sound a little funny to some, but in my world, if you could get some correspondence either from Dr. Martell, Sheriff's Department, whoever, I'm just asking, people are asking me about if they can fish, whether it be on the river or a private lake or whatever. I understand the no concentrated congregation, but they just want to know, can they go fishing where applicable?
My clear understanding on that, because we've been asked that, is There's nothing stopping you from fishing. Just respect the social distancing rules and don't do it in a big crowd. If you go by fishing by yourself, my understanding is that's within the boundaries of the order, because we've had other people ask that specific question.
Thank you.
Just, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, State Attorney Marilyn Height Ross. If you look under Section 5, subsection C, it deals with the outdoor activity and says to engage in outdoor activity provided the individuals comply with social distancing requirements as defined below, such as by way of example and without limitation, walking, hiking, running, or biking. Individuals may go to the public parks and open outdoor recreational areas. However, playgrounds may increase spread of COVID-19 and therefore shall be closed. So that I read directly from the governor's executive order. So hopefully that provides guidance for you.
Thank you very much, Marilyn.
You're
any
welcome.
other comments by board members? Okay, I don't see any other hands, so we'll move on to the consent agenda, or excuse me, to the announcements and communications. Clerk Gummow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All the items that are listed were received as correspondence.
And we'll go ahead and place those on file. Next item of business, consent agenda. It includes 4 things: raffle report, the bills, April approval of February 27th minutes, and the layover of the March 12th minutes. We already said we are omitting the March 19th minutes from 2020. So with that, I will take a motion to approve the consent agenda. And if you could just raise your hand, I could probably just call on it that way. Got a motion by Mrs. Crosby, a second by Mr. Tassoni on the consent agenda, second by Mr. Booker as well. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any board members who object to this motion? Hearing none, we will cast a yes vote for all members present. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Next item of business. Yeah, Mr. Fellers.
Thank you. Can I just ask anyone that's not speaking to make sure you mute your microphone? There's a lot of background noise.
Thank you. Go ahead and mute if you're, unless you have the floor. So the next item of business, we have the county administrator's report. Steve, you have anything?
Not really. The only thing is, obviously, with the executive order that was issued Friday afternoon, many of the departments have taken steps to deal with that particular order. However, I think most of the departments, either through remote or through actually having individuals in the offices or available through email, are dealing with the issues the public may have. Some of the offices, such as River Bluff and so on, it's they're trying to deal with the issues that come to them. But I think other than that, I think they're doing a pretty good job in terms of dealing with this situation.
Any other questions for Steve? Seeing none, then we'll move on. Any department head updates? Any of our department heads? I know we have several with us. I don't see any department head updates. Speak now or forever hold your peace, and then we'll take that as a no. We'll move on. We'll move on to the standing committee reports. Finance Committee, Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee has 2 items tonight. The first one is a budget amendment 2020-013, which is a SCAP grant, and that's to be laid over, but I'd like to suspend the rules and vote on it today.
We have a motion by Mr. Salgado to suspend the rules on budget amendment 2020-013 grant that was going to be laid over, but we have a motion to suspend, second by Mr. McDonald. Motion to suspend is before the board. Any discussion? I'll just cut right to the chase. Are there any board members who object to this motion? Hearing no dissent, we have passed the motion to suspend the rules unanimously. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is Budget Amendment 2020-017 for the sheriff, and that's to be laid over, but I'd like to suspend the rules and vote on this today.
Okay, we'll go ahead and make a motion on Budget Amendment 2020-017.
Just as a point of order, we didn't vote on the initial, the first one.
Thank you, Steve.
Very good point. Mr. Salgado, do you just want to take the first one and motion and pass that one through?
Yes. So then I'd like to move to approve Budget Amendment 2020-013, the SCAP grant.
Got a motion by Mr. Salgado on the SCAP grant. May I have a second, please? Thank you, Mr. Fellers. Thank you, Mr. Neighbors. SCAP grant is now before the board for consideration. Any questions or comments by board members? Please throw up your hand. I do not see any hands up. So then I'll go ahead and ask for the vote. Are there any board members who oppose this motion? I do not see any dissent, so the motion has passed unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Salgado.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Next item is Budget Amendment 2020-017 for the sheriff. That's to be laid over, but I'd like to suspend the rules and vote on it today.
Got a motion by Mr. Salgado to suspend the rules on Budget Amendment 2020-017 for the sheriff. May I have a second, please? Second by Mr. Neighbors, Mr. Girl. Motion to suspend is before the board. Any discussion on suspending the rules? Seeing none, then I'll ask, are there any board members who are opposed to suspending the rules? Seeing none, we've suspended the rules unanimously. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I move to approve Budget Amendment 2020-017 for the sheriff.
Motion by Mr. Salgado on Budget Amendment 2020-017. Sheriff Budget Amendment, second by Mr. McDonald, Mr. Girl as well. Item is now before the board for discussion. Any discussion by board members on this budget amendment? Yes, sir, Mr.
Me?
Yes, Mr. Reno.
Yes.
So this says that the budget, the revenue source is South Beloit School District. What is this for? Can we get an
overview then, Mr. Either Steve or Jaime, or Steve or Mr. Salgado? Steve?
Yeah, so real quick, my understanding, this is for the resource officer out in the South Beloit School. So it's a police officer that's out there, and we get reimbursed at this point in time, but it is a budget amendment for this year for $103,000. Steve, do you have the figures on that? What we get in return? You know that we actually make some money. I've heard from our last finance committee.
Thank you, Mr. Salgado. Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe the numbers that were indicated from the Sheriff's Department, they just received a check for $107,000. They were also looking at some additional money from some overtime that had been worked. So it does cover the cost of the additional position.
Okay, thank you, Steve, Mr. Salgado. Any other questions by board members? Seeing none, are there any board members who are opposed to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, then we will pass this unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Salgado.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes our finance report.
Thank you very much. Next item of business, zoning committee, Mr. Webster.
Yeah, zoning committee has 3 items here. Number one, okay, Z0220 is number 1. That's an amendment. That's for layover. Number 2 is Z0320. It's also an amendment, also in for layover. And the 3rd item on there under other matters is a resolution directing the zoning board of appeals to conduct a public hearing on certain unified developer. That's also going to be laid over as well. So
we have the 3 items from Mr. Webster that will lay over this evening. Is that correct, sir?
Correct. And as far as the timing on this, what with all of our other things that are going on, I'm not sure when we will have our next meeting, but it may be as long as our next regularly scheduled meeting, which would be the third Wednesday of the month, next month, depending on what's going on with this virus. So, if anybody's got any questions on these other issues, they can call myself or call Troy, and I'll be happy to explain them to them.
Okay, so we'll leave. Thank you very much, Mr. Webster. We got the 3 items read in to be laid over. Anything else, Mr. Webster?
No, that's it for this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Next item of business, Economic Development Committee, Mr. Billick. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have no report at the moment. We will be setting up a meeting. I've been coordinating closely with the chairman, and we'll be discussing and having everything kind of come forward to the committee soon in regards to the grant and, or well, I shouldn't say the grant, but partnering with our municipal partners on doing the loan program for small businesses for the COVID-19. Other than that, we have a couple other things that will be kind of discussed and brought up. So just expect an email pretty soon. We're just going to coordinate, try to see if we can do it by Zoom or however meeting, and do it accordingly.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else, Mr. Billick?
No, that's it.
Okay, wonderful. And then I'm, as I see, he just muted himself. We got somebody with, if everybody can make sure they mute if they're not talking right now, because there's a little bit of background. Thank you very much, Mr. Billick. We'll look forward to that meeting. Next item of business, Operations Administrative Committee, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 3 items before us tonight. First is a resolution accepting the resignation of David Boomer from the Winnebago County Board and declaring District 4 seat vacant.
And I'll take that as a motion by Mr. McDonald, a motion on accepting the resignation and declaring officially position vacant. Second by Mrs. Crosby, Mr. Harper, Mr. McPherson. Item is now before the board for discussion. Any discussion by board members? I do not see any hands up. So then, are there any board members who are opposed to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, we will cast a yes vote for all board members present. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is a resolution extending employee leasing agreement with GovTemps USA LLC, interim county administrator up to June 5, 2020. I so move.
We have a motion by Mr. McDonald on the resolution extending employee leasing agreement with GovTemps USA LLC for interim county administrator up to June 5th, 2020. May I have a second, please? Second by Mr. Girl. Mrs. Crosby, thank you. Item is now before the board for question and discussion. Any board members have any items or questions on this matter? Seeing none, are there any board members opposed to this motion? Seeing none, we will cast a yes vote for all members present, and it passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The final resolution is adopting the coronavirus response policy, and I so move.
Motion by Mr. McDonald on adopting the coronavirus policy. Second by Mr. Fellers. Thank you very much. And Mr. Girl and Mr. Billick, thank you. Item is now before the board for discussion. And Steve, do you want to give just a quick update or an overview, 30-second, over what this is the board is taking action on, just for the record? Steve?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This particular policy follows in line with what the courts are doing and so on. It also incorporates into the policy the Families First Coronavirus Response Act that was approved by the federal government last Wednesday and effective April 1st, 2020. The county is by definition required to follow this particular policy as it relates to its employees and so on. And this just incorporates that into this particular document. At the current time, there's could be some amendments to that particular policy. We're continuing to get direction from the Department of Labor and that, but for now, this is what we need to follow. So.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's important to point out as well as Mr. Chairman said, or Mr. Chapman said, excuse me, that private employers, they're getting tax credits, but this is written in such a way that as of right now, we will not be receiving tax credits for that sick day.
Yes.
Very good point. Any other comments or questions by board members? Seeing none, are there any board members opposed to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, I will cast a yes vote for all members present. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Chairman. That concludes our report.
Thank you very much. Next item of business, Public Works Committee, Mr. Tassoni. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have no report at this time. I just would like to say kudos to the IT department for allowing us to convene in this manner. And just to be mindful in the short term, if there is a Public Works meeting needed, that maybe Gus could help us get through and do the same scenario for Public Works or caucus or whatever.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tassoni. Agree on the shout out to the IT department. And I do believe yesterday they did talk about the idea that if committees need to occur, that we could have a similar setup. So absolutely. Next item of business, moving along, is Public Safety Committee, Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chairman. The Public Safety Committee has one item to bring forward. It's a resolution authorizing the county board chairman to extend the contracts for healthcare services for inmates of Winnebago County Jail and the detainees of the Juvenile Detention Center. And I so move.
We have a motion by Mr. Booker on the inmate medical for the county. I may have a second. Mr. Fellers, Mr. Butita. Item is now before the board for discussion. This is a big, I think probably our big ticket item and the most time sensitive of the items before the board tonight. Mr. Booker or Steve or Ann, does anybody want to speak to this just for the record? Anything you want to add?
The contract, yes, this is Mr. Booker. The contract, our current contract ends next week, actually. And the sheriff has indicated that they're willing to help out with the increase of the funds that are requested. I know Deputy Chief Saganek is online as well. But the last word I had from them was that they indicated that they would assist in the increase. Chief?
Yes, that's correct. The sheriff's office is willing to pay the increase out of the commissary fund.
Okay, that was a little muffled. So what you confirmed then for the record is the sheriff will cover the increase, year-over-year increase to the contract through the commissary fund. Thank you very much, Chief. Mr. Booker, anything else?
That's all I have from my end.
Okay, Ann or Steve, anything you want to add, or are we good?
I have nothing to add.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Ann. I have nothing to add. This is our standard that we do every year. We have to go through this process every year, and they are by far our best provider that we could possibly be working with. That's all I have. Captain Owens and Superintendent Redmond are also online if you have any questions for them.
Thank you for joining us, gentlemen, and thank you, Ann. Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just what was the increase?
The increase for juvenile was 4.53% of the contract. The increase for the jail was 5.1%. Per the original contract and per the RFP, the vendor was allowed a 2% or the greater of the annual CPI for medical, and the CPI came in at 5.1%, so they held it to 5.1%. They started out at 24% increase, so we beat them down to 5.1. So we're very happy with that.
So Ann, a follow-up, and I don't mean to jump in front of Mr. Schultz, but the percentage you shared, what does that equate to dollar-wise?
Yes, yes, I was just going to get that for you. For the jail, it's $134,888. And for juvenile, I don't have it in front of me. I think it's around 18,000. I gave my copy to Steve.
Actually, it's around 8,000 for the juvenile.
Oh, 8,000. Okay.
Thank you both. Mr. Schultz, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, in light of the epidemic that we're dealing with right now, how well positioned do you feel that these healthcare providers are to deal with a significant event in the jail?
Since we have
Thank you. I would suggest you have Captain Owens or Superintendent Redmond answer that question.
Yes, thank you, Ann. I was just going to say, since we have a couple of members of the Sheriff's Department on, is there anything you want to add regarding that topic?
Chairman, it's Bob Redmond. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, board, for asking the question. In light of everything that's going on and what's happened in the last 2 weeks, we've actually, as far as the COVID-19, we have assigned a shift lieutenant full-time to our coronavirus problems in the jail and the networking. We've tested one inmate who showed possible signs of it. Thank God those came back negative. We have a full protocol in the jail as far as personal protective equipment for both inmates and officers. And we're working day and night. Like I say, we've pulled the actual lieutenant who's a firefighter EMT off of his shift, and that's constantly what he's doing day and night. And I know that you, as the board and the county, have protocols that you're working at, and we'd be happy to help you out with those. But I can tell you right now, we've got a tremendous screening project that's going on in the jail. Our population as of this morning, maybe I don't have the numbers right in front of me. I believe it was March 16th. We're right around 740 inmates, somewhere in there, 700. Today we're at 593 this morning. So we're trying to contain and isolate any problems we see, and everybody's working together on it. But, and again, as far as protocols, we'd be happy to help any of you what we can do with you.
Good question. Mr. Schultz, any other follow-up? No. Real quick, since we have Mr. Redmond on. So my understanding is you temperature check folks coming in. They get a physical 10 days in, just to like welfare check or something like that. But are you doing temperature checks on corrections officers daily? I do know that is occurring at River Bluff. And I only ask, not to pry, but we actually are getting questions from the media on such things because some companies and some agencies are temperature checking folks.
At this point, Chairman, we are not. We're still researching that, and we're talking with the officers to get their take on it. It may be coming down the pipeline, but at this point, no. But as I say, everything, as you know, being at the press conferences and working with the health department, the CDC, it's evolving every minute. So it may come to that soon. But at this point, as far as employees know, what I can tell you is that we have absolutely stopped all programming, all visitors in the jail, with the exception of an attorney. And we're trying to do those by video visitation. So we're trying to limit all outside contact with the exception of officers, the inmates.
Understood. Thank you very much. And obviously the noted drop in jail population over a short period of time. Thank you very much, Mr. Redmond. Mr. Neighbors, I saw a hand up.
If I could, Mr. Chairman.
So, Mr. Redmond, what exactly are you doing with the staff to prevent them from bringing any of the virus into the jail?
Well, Mr. Neighbors, at this point, obviously, we've told staff it, and I'd be happy to share the letter with you. If you do not feel that you're up to par, if you feel that you have a temperature, if you feel that that there's something that may affect your work, that you need to stay home, basically. We have protective equipment for them, like I said, and we're working with them to monitor the inmates and limiting all access from the outside of the corrections officers.
Mr. Neighbors?
Okay, so is there any way that we can increase the protocol for the corrections officer and stuff? Because I get constant calls from my constituents about what are they doing with the jails. They want to let people out, and I'm trying to tell them that they're safe. But from what you just told me, that is not enough for me to go back and tell them, because that's just going to make them even more angry. That's all you're doing.
Well, in Mr. Neighbors, like I say, this is a fluid situation, and I will tell you, we've got very, very restrictive protocols in place as far as how our intake goes into the jail, where those inmates will be housed versus general inmates that have been in there, for the last, let's say, 3 weeks to a month that don't exhibit any signs of the coronavirus. And I can tell you, one of the safest places to be right now is probably that jail, both for the inmates and for what they could contract, because they're not having this outside public contact. We're certainly researching it. Every day we're on teleconference with, as I said, this week we were with the Surgeon General, the CDC. It's a continual thing, and this is something that we're actually working at, is that we may start screening the corrections officers as they come in. But at this point, is it a full-blown recommendation? No. And I will tell you, you say the population is down, which it is, when within a 2-week period, 140 inmates less in that jail. That's an actual tribute to the judges in this county, the state's attorney, the public defender's office, who have worked with us day and night to make these things happen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Mr. Chairman, yes, if I could just add, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be happy to work, obviously, with the sheriff's staff. I will tell you that the chief judge did issue a general order today, 1.03, requiring or banning basically certain individuals from coming into any court facility. So again, as Mr. Redmond said, as this unfolds, obviously, we have to put parameters in place. I, 2 weeks ago, put into place a protocol for visitors to my office, screening with certain measures recommended by the CDC that are contained in the judge's order that was issued today, as well as the order that was issued by the Illinois Supreme Court over a week ago. So we are trying to individuals who may be entering these public buildings for essential services that we are required to provide. And so certainly, again, I'm happy to work with Mr. Redmond and the Sheriff's Office regarding that.
Got it. Thank you very much, Marilyn. Mr. Neighbors, thank you very much. And we do have Dr. Martell on the line, and I know she is actually through the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center. Her and her team are in the jail every day down in the EOC. So I'm sure there's contact there as well. So the item before the board that we just
Mr. Chairman.
before us is the inmate medical. I'll go to Mr. Fellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question for Dr. Martell, since I do see she's on the line here, in relation to Mr. Neighbor's question. Currently, what does the numbers show the percentage of people who are positive with COVID-19 but are otherwise asymptomatic?
Can I just hold real quick on the question? It's a great question. I don't want to in any way get in your way of asking it. Can we take the vote on, unless it's going to impact the vote on the inmate medical, let's get the vote out of the way and then we'll open it up for some questions. I'm sure there'll be a few for Dr. Martell. Is that okay, Mr. Fellers?
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, we'll definitely come back to it. So the item before the board is the inmate medical. Any other specific questions on that before we get to a few COVID-19 specific questions? Okay, then we'll take the vote. Are there any board members opposed to the passing the inmate medical contract? Seeing and hearing none, we will cast a yes vote for all members present. Motion passes unanimously. And if you'll indulge me, Mr. Booker, we'll just stay in your committee. This is public health is part of public safety, or vice versa, however you want to say it. There was a good question by Mr. Fellers, and if you'll indulge me, I'll go to him to ask his question.
I agree, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Fellers.
Thank you. Yes, the question was for Dr. Martell. Based on current studies from around the world or out of South Korea where there's been mass testing done, what percentage of people who have been tested positive for COVID-19 are otherwise asymptomatic? And how does that affect intake, not into the jail, but into other areas as well?
Well, I can't speak to the numbers you may be looking at, but we estimate right now, based on our testing capability, approximately 20% of the population may be infected at some point. But I want to tell, the jail has worked, first of all, the medical provider, which is what was being discussed earlier, has protocols in place, and we work with them as if we call it a congregate setting. So it's similar to treated like a River Bluff or any kind of an inpatient type center. So the healthcare provider staff is monitoring themselves as recommended. They also then, what we do is isolate and cohort any individuals. I know that the jail has been working with us almost daily. If anyone comes into the facility, they are screened. If they screen positive, we determine the testing capability, and they're given priority for testing if they're coming from a congregate setting. So those individuals who meet the criteria for testing are sent for testing. In terms of individuals reporting to duty, there is no standard really testing right now recommended for healthcare workers in general, right? So what we really have to do is monitor individuals. Anyone who reports an illness should immediately report it, move out of the facility, report it to their supervisor so that we can quarantine them out and determine what their level of risk was, right? So again, part of that is that investigative process, but there's not a recommendation to test the general public who is not showing symptoms. Does that answer the question?
To a degree, yes.
Any other questions? Since we have Dr. Martell for a minute, any other COVID-related questions? Mr. Arena?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I don't know if this is necessarily for Dr. Martell, might be for Mr. Redmond. I share Mr. Neighbor's concern about the possibility of correction officers coming in and out, being able to bring in the virus. The policy we just passed tonight through operations, if they're coming in the door and they get it, we take their temperature and they are sent home because there's a suspicion they could be carrying the virus, they still get paid, right? Isn't that what we just adopted tonight? I guess is one question. And then the second question would be, have they objected to being having their temperature taken coming in the door? I think if there's no objection and they're getting paid and it's something we can implement, then we should.
Mr. Redmond, react or speak to that. I agree. I actually will double follow up tomorrow on the temperature taking piece in the jail, because I was under the impression that was happening, or maybe it is in certain sections, but I do know temperature taking is taking place for every employee that's going in to River Bluff daily. That is a practice that's been in place for, I don't know, more than a week now, I think. But we'll double check on that. But is Steve or Dr. Martell, anything to add to that?
Again, this becomes part of it, and Mr. Redmond's right. This is part of an evolving situation. We started this week at the health department. Everyone who's working and everyone in incident command must be temperature checked. We're doing it twice a day at the beginning and then midway through the shift. In addition, anyone who reports symptoms is taken off duty immediately for evaluation, and so that we can move them out of systems that expose vulnerable populations. So I believe that most of the recommendations out for Congress is to move them into that testing and screening on a daily basis.
Thank you, Dr. Martell. Any follow-up, Mr. Arena?
No, thank you.
Any other questions on anything COVID-related, COVID-19 related? Seeing none, Mr. Booker, any other items for your committee?
No, Chairman, that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Martell. Any unfinished business by board members?
Yes, Chairman. Angie Gorel.
Hi, Angie. Go ahead.
I've been watching you and Dr. Martell on television for the last 2 weeks. That's the nice thing about having to stay home. The only thing you get to watch is TV sometimes. I want to commend you and Dr. Martell. It's fantastic because all of you who are employed by our county board have been so ahead of the game that you are so proactive, and people are not giving you credit, all of you. I'm talking about River Bluff. I'm talking about our administration building, our jail, the health department, and whoever else I forgot. You have all been very, very proactive in this. And I just can't thank you enough for all you have done to keep us safe. There's no way you're going to do 100%. But by God, if you can do 50, you're doing fantastic. And our board, our people, that our staff and our heads of departments, everyone have been so far ahead of the game. Out River Bluff, I think it's been even 2 weeks that they've been checking everybody for temperatures. I'm just so proud of all of you because people can say what they want. But we have been really doing our job. Thank you all. I appreciate it. And so do my constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gorel. I would just say Dr. Martell has been fabulous, and her knowledge of this issue has been, I think, on full display, and that's great. I think at the staff level, at the professional staff level inside the county, the work Steve did with department heads ahead of some of the state closures and that positioned River Bluff well, working in alignment with the health department. But I know HR, Deb's on from HR. I do know some of the other electeds, like Nancy McPherson, the recorder, was very proactive with her staff. Sue Gorel, by the way, just since we're talking about this, Sue Gorel may be coming to the board on an item that would be need board approval regarding taxes, property taxes. We'll see. She's looking at it, and she'll probably be talking to the state's attorney's office here shortly. But there's been a lot of good work. I know that Clerk Gummow had to deal with that with the elections as well. So a lot of good work by a lot of good people. So thank you for mentioning that. Any other comments? Any other unfinished business? Dr. Martell.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all of the county offices. Every time we've reached out to them, pushed out guidance, a lot of this comes out after hours, late at night. We call over and they are on the spot, to Angie's point. A lot of these are very disruptive to everyday operations. As everyone sits here, we know that. But I think every single one of our county offices, when the chips are down, they have come through, looked at recommendations, said, how can we get this done? So thanks to all. We're hoping to flatten that curve.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martell. Any other unfinished business? Seeing none. Any under new business? We do have two items under Rock River Water Reclamation District. We got two reappointments to read in for first reading. That is Ben Bernstein, I'm sorry. And then Rick Pollock. Many of you know Rick. He used to serve on the county board and has been on the reclamation district for several years. Both are highly recommended. Just to full disclosure, Tim Hansen, their executive director, is very passionate about asking the county board to reappoint these folks. They have a nice board dynamic, just so you know. I see a hand up, Mr. Tassoni, then Mr. McDonald. Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in the absence of any objections, I would motion to suspend the rules so that we can take those two appointments up tonight.
Okay, we got a motion by Mr. Tassoni to suspend on both Rick Pollock and Ben Bernston. Is somebody comfortable seconding? I see several hands up. Mr. Neighbors, Mr. Girl. The motion to suspend is now before the board. Are there any discussion on suspending the rules? Are there any board members opposed to suspending the rules? Seeing and hearing none, we'll cast a yes vote for all members present. We've suspended the rules. And then I'll go to Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd move to approve both appointments.
Got a motion by Mr. Tassoni on the Ben Bernston and Rick Pollock appointments. A second by Mr. Girl. Thank you again. Item is now before the board. Any discussion, questions by board members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I did it wrong.
Aye.
Any opposed? Are there any opposed to this motion? Sorry. Nobody's opposed, so we'll cast a yes vote for all members present. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much for that consideration. Any other business before the board? Yes, sir, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been a lot of talk about the host fees being used. I think we're obviously way early on in this virus. I'm concerned what it's going to do with all the retail being shut down. I'm very, very concerned what it's going to do to our financial situation. I know there's been some things in the media about $250,000 going to a small business fund. I think that's an honorable thing. I don't support it right now, as well as all of our other long-term host fee commitments. I think right now might be appropriate time to hit the pause button until we can see how this is going to affect our bottom line, to see if we then can hopefully instate them and continue on business as usual. But I have a very serious concern that that's not going to be the case.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Any other items under new business? Yes, Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I agree with Mr. McDonald somewhat about we really need to do some consideration in what we might face in the future here with lesser tax revenues coming in. But one thing that did catch my attention and that I'm sincere to was United Way with its Emerging Needs Fund and the pledges and matching funds that are going around out there. And at this time, I'd just like to make it publicly known that the $1,000 of money that each board member is given per year, I would vocally pledge my $1,000 to go United Way and to assist that fund, and would encourage anyone else to do the same as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tassoni. Any other discussion by board members? Seeing none.
Yes, this is Dorothy. Just a moment.
Hi, Dorothy.
Dorothy Red.
Go ahead, Mrs.
Hi. I have a concern. I've received a couple of calls from my constituents, but I need to take it to the committee first. It's about the roaming dogs running loose. So, public safety, when are we meeting?
I'll have you connect with Mr. Booker about the next time they meet. I don't know that there's a date set at this time.
Okay, fine. I'll bring it up in committee.
Okay. I do know that's been
Thank you.
I do know dogs in general have been a topic, and I just want to clear up misinformation that has been put out on, among other places, Facebook. The Winnebago County Animal Services, they have reduced operations. However, when it comes to public safety or the safety of an animal, they are taking dogs, and on a case-by-case basis, can, as an exception, taken animals. Actually, I had a discussion with Mr. Chapman and Brett Frazier this morning on it. So there was some concern that somehow Animal Services is turning away all animals. That is not the case. There is a reduction in their operation. However, if anything public safety related or animal safety related, they continue to do what it is they do. I know that probably doesn't answer all questions or even your question, but I just wanted to let people know And with that, I see Mr. Fellers has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can speak to this. And Mrs. Red, one of your constituents contacted me regarding the exact same thing. There's been some misinformation out there that there are no leash laws out in the unincorporated parts of the county. Brett Frazier reached out to that constituent, informed him yes there were, and they sent an officer out to take care of it, and also made sure to communicate to all animal services officers and staff that there are leash laws out in the county and that dogs are not allowed to roam freely, and that they will be responding to calls regarding that. So I want to make sure you had that information as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I need to talk with you later because I got another call today, I think from the same person. So maybe he's not understanding or there's some miscommunication.
Yeah, he understands now. He got a call. He got a call from Animal Services today.
Okay, fine.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Red, Mr. Fellers. You know what, Mr. Fiducia, I apologize. I skipped past Personnel and Policy Committee, and I'll go to you, sir. Is there anything you had? I know there's no action item, but do you have any business for the board?
No need to apologize. You've covered it all, and especially with Animal Services, we're reducing the numbers out there, and we're doing business as usual. And Mr. Frazier is taking